Hi, everybody, and welcome back to World Wildlife Journeys with Russell Gammon. And today I'm joined figuratively in my studio by my good friend Alan McSmith, who's up in the bushveld of Kruger National Park. Alan is a fellow of TED Educational. You can see his TED talk on there, and I'd strongly encourage you guys to all go and watch it. It's very instructional and very edifying and very uplifting. Alan's a professional guide with a storied history behind him, and he does private safaris all over Southern and East Africa from his base here in South Africa. But he's also a special person in my life because he has a certain philosophical bent that I really appreciate. He's something of a wilderness philosopher. So I've been wanting to get him on the show and talk a little bit about wilderness and why it's important to us and what it means to us as people. So Alan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you join us.
Yeah, thanks, Russell, and good morning from Hoedspruit. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite and the opportunity to share a story or two.
Absolute pleasure. Guides are invertebrate storytellers. So Alan's got some good ones. He was telling me before about nearly drowning and getting eaten by crocodiles in the Sahara Desert, but I'll have to get him back for that story because it's a doozy. Alan, tell us, one of the things that we've been talking about in terms of the importance of the wilderness to us as human beings going forwards. And I said to you that I felt like this pause that had happened because of COVID has shut us in our rooms. We haven't been able to go outdoors. We haven't been able to experience nature in the way that we would normally. And I'm kind of hopeful that the human race has been given a taste of what the world will look like without the wilderness. And I'm kind of hopeful that it'll be a wake-up call to people to realize that that it's important to us. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly, Russell. I mean, it's been a rough ride for the guiding fraternity, and not only us. I mean, everybody, all sectors in the world are basically on our knees at the moment. And I think there's, if I have any hope, or if there's anything positive at all that can emerge from the COVID pandemic, it's perhaps an understanding of the value of some ecological thought process in our life. And I don't mean that as a guide. It applies to everyone. Ecology and the principles of ecology is a universal language. And I think there's been a cumulative effect of environmental issues over the years, and social issues, spiritual issues, social splits. Things are not going well in the world at the moment, and there just seems to be a point where it's a cumulative, a build-up effect to where we are now in the world at the moment. And I don't think there's too many people that can deny now that that we need to treat the world and we need to treat the environment with a little bit more care and respect than we have. I think it's a clanging gong now that's rattling in our ears like never before. And I guess the lockdowns, as fortunate and as enforced as they may be, I think enforcing a scenario on a person is never conducive to any positive outcome. But I think everyone's in this together, and this sort of ecological understanding that my role, what I do if I step outside the house, if I go up and talk to someone, or someone comes up and talks to me, there is an ecological impact in my actions now. And everyone is slightly more aware of this process and how delicate it is.
Yeah, we're certainly getting a first-hand re-education in the principles of Darwinian evolution, aren't we?
Yeah, this is it. This is it. And if you I mean, if you look at the principles of nature, and I say this, this thought process or these things that I'm saying are sometimes difficult to accept or difficult to believe in a corporate or in a society that's built on the principles of commerce. But if you look at the principles of nature, you know, the production or energy moves in circular forms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get producers, you get consumers, and then through a number of decomposers, the energy, ultimately the production gets returned to the source.
Mm.
Everyone, all those organisms benefit in the circuit. But in corporate intelligence, if you'd like to call it that way, the production or consumption of energy is in a linear format. So you have a source, you have a consumer, and then you have endless amounts of consumers. And every now and again, there may be a bit of noise in the air. An NGO might create some awareness, and there's a little bit of change in trajectory back to the source. But invariably, because of the instructions that we've been taken by our leaders, that we've been taught to assimilate production to our own benefit.
Yeah. Do you see that changing anywhere in the corporate world in small ways? Do you think there's a dawning of a realization of where, you know, when they design a product life cycle, it has to include the, you know, what happens to that product after the end user's finished using it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely progress in that regard. There's certainly some alternative thought patterns. I mean, if you the discussions that I've had with executive business leaders in the past 5 years, even culminating now during the pandemic, I could never have had the discussion I had 10 years ago or 15 years ago. There was very little understanding of this ecological process that, you know, if we recruit master partners in their own field, they can, if we co-create or develop projects or concepts by using many different sources of inspiration, you can actually become more productive.
Yeah.
And I think in the past it was all about, you know, well, I'm doing what's best for me and for my company, and I'm going to squash the opposition in the process. I think there is a gradual sort of release of the pressure cooker in that regard. Is there's certainly more co-creation going on, and it's not across the world. There are cultures, there are European cultures that do that, but it's a minority.
Yeah. It's an embryonic concept. And on more of a personal level, what is it that you feel? You know, you're a great proponent of wilderness as an important part of the human existence. And you got some interesting thoughts on why that is. Tell us on a personal level, you know, why should somebody care about the existence of a wilderness that, let's face it, it's a privileged thing. Not everybody gets to come and visit it. What is it that's important about it to us as a species, do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm of the opinion that well, the human animal has evolved principally in Africa for over 4 million years. Some people say. So it's taken 4 million years for you and I to get to this moment where we're having this conversation, and we may have looked somewhat different 4 million years ago, but the ecological growth or the evolutionary growth is embedded in our DNA. If that's the case, then as much as 95% plus, certainly a minimum 95% of all the data, all the information, all the understanding that we have is rooted in a hunter-gatherer existence, which is in a state of union with nature. It's in a state of partnership, an intrinsic partnership with nature. The 5% or the 4% that's occurred when we've stepped out of that has happened really recently, when modern man started emerging. We started distancing ourselves from nature and the laws of ecology. And that's essentially where the world changed. I mean, in 1950, there was, I believe, 2.5 billion people in the world. And in my father's lifetime, it's more than doubled. So the quickening of what's happened has happened in a really, really short expanse of time. And if you look at the impact of that, I believe, if our DNA, if the source of our existence is rooted in this union, this unity with nature, the modern ailments of society, the stress-related diseases, heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure, those are all contemporary ailments that we are having, and we are not designed, we are not genetically designed to cope with these, because it's happening so quickly in the sequence. And in any source of inspiration, if you the leaders of the major religious sects in the world, you find the forerunners of industry, artists, professionals that constantly come up with original thought. These are guys that draw inspiration from themselves, and my understanding of the wilderness experience is it's a process of internalizing the outer landscape. So in a sense, we return back to that indigenous self that we have, that's rooted in nature.
Yeah.
And,
so what you're saying is that a huge portion of who we are is actually tied to the wilderness, and it's only when you are in the wilderness that part of you really makes sense. I always say to people, that that this Africa is home. And you have experienced this as I have. When you take people on safari, these are people who are well traveled, they've been all over the world, and you could make an argument from a purely intellectual point of view that the wildlife of Australia is far more interesting than the wildlife of Africa, because they've got marsupials, which are really unusual. But there's an X factor about people who come to Africa and visit Africa that just, they can go anywhere in the world, but once they've been to Africa, there's an X factor about this place. And I always explain it to people. I say, look, this is where we evolved. So you want to tell me that somewhere buried in that 98% of your DNA that evolved on this continent, there isn't a little bit of code that says this is what home looks like, this is what home smells like, this is what home tastes like, there's what I say to people is, look, visit Africa, because literally every fiber of your being is going to jump for joy because it feels like it's coming home. And that's the X factor of Africa.
Agreed. What you say is spot on. I mean, the outer landscapes of Africa are just sublime. I mean, everyone has seen a coffee table book with an African sunset or a lion or what have you. But as you say, the X factor is here, and the human genome originated from Africa. And if that's the case, then this literally is the motherland for us all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people speak of that. You know, a lot of guys that never been to Africa before, have never met anyone that's been to Africa before, but when they come here and they feel the lion roaring at the red dawn,
Yeah.
there's just something. There's something. A light bulb comes on, and it's often a very quiet, very introspective, often
Yeah.
emotional
Yeah. It's
encounter.
almost at a
After the
subconscious level. It's almost
yeah,
subconscious. And I always say to people, hold
yeah,
on to that, because your logical brain is going to want to discard that as a how could this possibly be familiar to me? It must be because I watch a lot of wildlife documentaries, or because I saw this on TV sometime, or no, it's because you have a genetic operating system that has been downloaded and
yeah,
downloaded and downloaded. You have a genetic knowledge of this place, and your body is just
exactly,
going
yeah,
to tell you, hey, there's nothing, you have that experience. You can go anywhere in the world, live in fancy hotels, but when you come home, there's something about
yeah,
home that we are just designed to like. This is home. It feels good.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Alan,
And
tell us a bit.
as far as
Tell us a bit about
still,
yeah. I think I lost you there for a bit. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing now up in
yeah,
Chile.
Uh, yeah, Russell, I'm involved with an organization called the Africa Experience, and it's spearheaded by a foundation which is based in Holland. It's called Timbo Africa, and what what the model is built on is the circular flow of opportunity or production, and it's again this comes from the the ecological mindset. So we have 2 tented safari camps up in Tuli, and any profits that we make are circulated back into the foundation uh, fund base. Of course, it's complemented by the funding network in Europe and elsewhere. And through that finance, we operating a series of research and conservation projects in the Tuli. Um, we run a full-on PhD level research project, and some of the results that the guys are uncovering, it's incredible. I mean, we've counted to date 31 different brown hyena.
Wow.
Different individual brown hyena in our central Tuli concession, which is about 15,000 hectares. And for me, that's kind of like an unheard of amount. You know, in the Kalahari or the western parts of South Africa, they're nowhere near those numbers. So, as far as we're concerned, it could be the highest population of brown hyena, free-ranging brown hyena,
Yeah.
in Africa, in the world.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, but yeah. So through these opportunities, we also generating funds. What the backline fence, the boundary fence of the central Tuli is in pretty bad shape at the moment, and there's a lot of certainly in the dry season, there's a lot of elephant moving out and raiding villages and giving local communities a hard time. So we've pledged to recreate this barrier to to stop poachers entering, to stop animals getting out. The philosophy is, Russell, I've always believed that the future of any conservation project, the future of any game reserve in Africa depends on partnerships with the local communities that neighbor them. There has to be some kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
some kind of scenario where both parties or both ideas, both worldviews benefit. And without that, you're always going to have conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's encouraging to see how widely that concept is now being adopted. It's almost everywhere I go in Africa, that kind of old model of, we keep what we make and you guys stay out the park. It's almost gone. You know, I don't encounter that very much anymore anywhere I travel. I guess neither do you. So I mean, that's a very encouraging development. And your fact that you've got a a foundation supporting you is, I think, also quite a forward-looking funding model, because I think a lot of the purely commercial camps, the last year has been very, very hard for those guys. And I think that your funding model is definitely going to be one that everybody's going to be looking at going forwards, because, you know, those safari camps are doing good environmental work, and they play a very important role. But I think what's been brought home to everybody is commerce alone is not going to get us over the line.
No, you're right, absolutely right. And I think you mentioned that on your travels through African game reserves, you seldom see the old dinosaur model of, fence it, keep them out, keep us in kind of worldview. That is extinct now, or it's largely extinct, and so it should be. Because and this for me is a further example of the progress, if you'd like to call it, or the transformation that conservation has been making.
Mm.
It's a step in the right direction of creating awareness to a more, call it a sacred attitude towards conservation. Because without the game reserves, without nature in the purest sense possible, without maintaining the highest degree of biodiversity as possible, you don't have the interest from the funders. You don't have the interest from the safari operators. And if you don't have that, you'll have an ambivalent attitude towards conservation from local community members at best.
Mm.
They won't tolerate conflict, or predators killing livestock. They'll stop tolerating it. So for me, one of the greatest examples that I saw of this happened in Namibia, which has got a very unique conservation model, where the areas are divided up into conservancies, and each conservancy is run with its own kind of management plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the crossovers, or the gray areas between these conservancies, are invariably a source of conflict.
Yeah.
And last year, 2019, do you recall the shooting of Voortrekker, that big elephant bull?
Yes.
Desert elephant in southern Damaraland. When the local community members and the conservancy board members actually found that there was a license out for Voortrekker as a problem animal, these guys all collectively wrote to the Ministry of Environmental Affairs and Tourism and said, guys, listen, don't shoot this elephant. We need him. We want this elephant on our landscape. And for me, that was kind of like a paradigm shift, between the old days of, the elephant they're dangerous, they're destructive. Let's kill it. Let's have some short-term benefit in some meat. We might make a few bucks from the process. And that for me, out in the middle of the desert, some of the remotest or maybe impoverished parts of southern Africa, this thought process was emerging.
Yeah.
And that for me was a further a trigger or affirmation that we have to look at nature through a different lens.
Yeah.
We have to look at biodiversity and how it can benefit us through a different lens, and we have to take the spotlight of commerce off it.
Yeah.
Elephants and trees, sharks, whatever we consume at incredible rates, they're not commodities.
No.
Nature, some things are just not for sale. I was saying that, however, Russell, I mean, we chatting yesterday, you mentioned of a colleague of yours in Zimbabwe who is a professional hunter, and under that model, under those conditions, without different opportunities of support, he's adapting.
Yeah.
He's adapting this model, and it's working. And that's the principle of ecology. We need as many inspired change makers operating in union.
You know, here's a good example. You were telling me earlier about going to an oasis in the middle of the Sahara Desert and finding a group of crocodiles that have been isolated there for a long period of time and have now become dwarf versions of what they started out as. This is, to me, a good example of that, because, you know, the individual that I was talking about, Buzz Charlton, is doing some incredible conservation work, you know, in a very, very isolated and, you know, it's a part of Africa where nobody goes. And unless you're a hunter, then you go there because of the work that Buzz is doing, really. And this is an example of this thing that we discussed and what we agreed on is, you know, one size does not fit all. You know, the whole principle of Darwinian evolution is that you evolve a strategy according to the circumstances in which you find yourself. And you know, this is something that I feel very strongly about, is we need to be extremely careful. You know, people are very passionate about advocating for their particular solution because it works where they are, and that's great. I'm all about that. You know, listen to the local people and do what works for that particular situation, but understand that this is a vast continent. It's 24% of the Earth's surface. So, you know, it's like saying, well, you know, what works for the Arctic fox, you know, in North America, we're gonna use the same strategy for the coyote in Arizona. It's just it beggars belief that we are still in this paradigm where people are advocating, you know, a one size fits all solution, because it simply will not work. So yeah, I think there's nuance there, and we need to acknowledge that. But tell me a little bit about, you know, we were also talking about how you as an individual have a particular affinity for elephants. Talk me through this love for elephants. When did it start? Does your wife know about it? And what's at the heart of it for you? But what do they mean to you personally?
Gosh, Russell, where did we start? I guess at the beginning is a good place. By the way, yes, my wife does know about it. She often loses sleep when I'm away, but that's maybe it's for another discussion. Yeah, there's something about elephants, isn't there? You know, they're what we professional guides call very, very big. It's hard to miss an elephant on a landscape. You're saying that, I mean, they can disappear behind blades of grass that I've, you know,
Yeah.
that is just another discussion on its own. But okay, so you've got this big, large 5-ton animal. It's not just 5 tons of protein. There's something there. There's a special something there, and what the special something is, how to actually find a vocabulary to describe it or wrap it into words, is a challenge in itself. I think it's the sum total of the complexity of elephants, the intelligence they have. They have people say elephants will never forget, and yeah, they have a memory, but why do they have a memory? It's because that they have an intelligence.
So there's a thing that I always find in their presence. There's something that sets them apart. You can
Yeah.
have an encounter with a hippo or a buffalo or a giraffe or a lion or any of the other iconic species.
Yeah.
But the interaction that you have with a big bull elephant is of a completely different dimension.
Yeah, of course. If you're interacting with elephants and you're watching them, or you just look, just the sense of presence you get from them. I love buffalo, for example. I really enjoy buffalo. But when you look into a buffalo's face, the greatest of respect, there's not a lot going on
Yeah, the lights
there.
are on, but no one's home.
I mean, they're amazing in a curious buffalo kind of way. But with elephant, there's a complexity there, and they're complicated animals. And I think we have to define what if something is complicated. Um, it's difficult to find a solution to unravel it. But if something is complex, it's easy to understand. So elephants are complicated.
The other thing
They have
I think is I always say to people, I'd hate to play poker with a bunch of buffalo because they're unreadable. They might be about to run away, they might be about to come and try and kill you, but you would never know from their expression. And I think the thing with elephants is they have the most incredibly eloquent body language. They're talking to you the whole time.
Yeah.
Like every movement of the trunk, every inclination of the head, every movement of the ears, the tail, literally every fiber of their being is communicating with you all the time.
Yeah, when we having interactions with the elephant in the bush, I often say to the clients, watch the elephant's eyes, because the eyes are the window of the soul. If you are trying to gauge a change in behavior or a change in mood, a swing, it's the same with people. It doesn't happen with the body; it happens with the eyes.
Mm.
So watch the eyes and watch the feet and watch the tip of the trunk, and you'll see a coordination between all three.
Yeah.
An elephant is never still. The whole body is almost in a sense, a satellite dish. It's receiving information through its whole body at all times, but particularly through its feet, that are highly receptive and highly sensitive satellite dishes. Even as far as being able to receive and decode infrasonic sound, sound in the form of energy, which can cover distances of, well, the limit of this is up for debate, but it's certainly up at 100 kilometers. That elephants are able to communicate with one another. And if you drop a stone in a puddle of water, you have the ripples just emerging in all directions. When an elephant is communicating through this subsonic sound, the sound is emerging from that elephant in all different directions, multidimensionally, and it's traveling through the ground, and it's being decoded by another elephant. But it's not just sound that it's receiving; it's messages, and sometimes quite complex information.
Yeah.
And this is all done for elephants to communicate with each other, to become spatially aware, which is part of how they survive out in the wild. And if you look at when an elephant is born, when a young elephant is born, its brain is proportionately smaller than what it will grow up to be. So that happens in humans, it happens in dolphins, it happens in gorillas, where the brain develops as the body grows. In antelope and buffalo, the animals are born with their brain in situ. It doesn't really change that much.
Yeah.
So for me, immediately that indicates there's a capacity to learn.
Yeah.
The brain is developing. The same principles with us. And if you accept that there's a capacity to learn, the inverse concept must be true, that there's a capacity to teach.
Mm.
And what, because the information is complex, what the adults are passing down to the baby elephants is incredibly intricate information.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, this is one of the things that you commented on my earlier interview with Rory Young, and we discussed it in that thing, saying, especially for elephants living in an environment like the deserts of Mali, that that ability to learn and to pass on information from one generation to the next is actually what enables their survival in those very capricious environments. So, when we start say, we've got an arrogance that we say, well, you know what, if we eradicate all of the elephants in Mali, we'll just bring some more elephants and drop them off, because our understanding is that these animals, regardless of where they come from, are pre-programmed with enough information to live in any environment. And what we're discovering is that that's actually not true, that they have no ability to survive in an environment like the Sahara unless they know where the water holes are. If you keep an elephant population there long enough, they'll eventually figure it out. But I think they've seen this with the difficulties that are being created in the Botswana ecosystem, where they're trying to get those elephants to go up into Angola. And there's a real reluctance on the part of those elephants, because it's not something that, it's not something that they've grown up doing, and they're not keen to go and learn anything new.
Yeah, I think there's elephant are like that. I think they certainly have their home ranges there, and there's even an understanding now within research that there is different cultures of elephants, different languages, there's different dialects, and it happened countless of times close to where we are here in the Kruger National Park, where they, in an attempt to expand the Transfrontier Reserve, they collected or they mobilized a group of elephants, picked them up and put them into Mozambique. And when the elephants kind of came to, all they did is it just turned around and walked back. I mean, they obviously did. Maybe they didn't speak the Portuguese dialect, but it certainly is another fascinating insight into the complexity of elephant. And I don't think these things are confined to elephant.
No.
But because they're so visual and easy to watch and relatively easy to get into a position to absorb all these subtleties that make elephants special, they're certainly a keystone animal on safari, I believe.
We used to watch them in Mana Pools and the Nyakasanga River. I used to go over the Nyakasanga River, which was into a hunting area at night, because there was no hunting allowed at night. And in the morning, if you were sitting on the Nyakasanga area, you'd see them in the dusk, just as the light was coming up, and they were running for the riverbank. And they'd sprint flat out down into the riverbank, and they'd keep going until they got to the midpoint of the river. And then they'd stop and saunter up the other side. They knew exactly where the boundary was. They knew that they were safe in the dark, and they knew that they had to be back in the park by first light. I mean, it was unbelievable. Who taught them that? Nobody knows, but they knew.
It's amazing, isn't it? And what we've also seen, I've personally witnessed here in the Timbavati Game Reserve, which borders the Kruger. There used to be a fence there, a physical boundary. And in those days, there was a lot of indiscriminate hunting going on, and the fence was not the only boundary. There was that invisible boundary that the elephants were brought up with it. And when that fence came down, you could watch movements of elephants coming from the Kruger. They'd get to the old fence line, they'd wander into the Timbavati for a meter or 10 meters or so, and then abruptly turn back. So the elephants are not confined by physical barriers. The sense of stress or the sense of history of an area is passed down from generation to generation. So an elephant calf will literally sprint through the area where shooting or hunting or culling has occurred, or poaching has occurred. And this is an elephant too young to have experienced it. It's not. It's not. It's not from memory. It's from being taught and being told how to do it.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Alan, I know that you've got other things that you need to get to. Thank you very much for joining us.
Can I share another story? Sure. Can we go into extra time, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Knock yourself out.
When any of your listeners on the show, if you're looking for what's the word, a surprising safari experience, do some research on Zakouma National Park in Chad. I think for me, as guiding for 32 years before I managed to get up there, my reference system of pristine ecosystems or concentrations of game was the Okavango. I'd never guided in East Africa, so I never saw the volumes of zebra and wildebeest that you would see up there. So that was kind of my reference point. But when I got to Zakouma for the first time, my goodness, it was like an infinity pool of animal encounters, and different animals, different variations. You have the Kordofan giraffe, you have Lelwell's hartebeest, it's the forest buffalo that you find there. So it's the same animals, but different variations. They look different, coloration is different, but simply layers of volumes of animals. So you'd be on this open floodplain and you'd have 20 giraffe, and behind them you'd have 300 buffalo, and then olive baboons walking past, and then a flock of 100,000 quelea coming in from stage left, and you'd have 300 or 400 northern crowned cranes. That sort of intense interaction. Now, Zakouma National Park was a pretty lawless area. It was a national park proclaimed in the 60s, but Chad is not called the dark heart of Africa for nothing, I believe. And when the African Parks Network took over the running of the reserve, Zakouma, the first thing they did was obviously get a handle on the security of the area. Intensive, extreme poaching, elephant poaching was occurring there, mostly from mounted poachers from Janjaweed rebels from the Sudanese areas would come in and have these extreme poaching safaris where they'd round up 200-300 elephant in one place and just mow them down. So in a relatively short space of time, the African Parks Network turned this around, and they were slowly able to start a tourism venture where the reserve was secure enough and convenient logistics were in place to start bringing folks in to experience this, because the donor dollar can only be stretched so far.
Sure.
And the reserve now, we were chatting yesterday, and it's very difficult to be, let's be honest, it's easy to be pessimistic about conservation in Africa. And the story of Zakouma and the restoration and the regenerative impact of what has happened there is a model that I believe should be taken note of on the international conservation stage.
Yeah.
It all comes down to me to elephant. Because of the public awareness, and you spoke about anthropomorphism earlier, and how that is slowly becoming ingrained into mainstream conservation attitudes. And animals, they're not just animals. They're there's a soul to them, and that there's something that needs nurturing in animals. And that mindset is becoming more and more prevalent, and so it should in conservation. But when the world was first made aware of this extreme volume of elephant poaching, that's when the interest in this conservation project was born, as far as I was concerned. Conservation organizations started to develop, donor money came in, interest came in, commitment came in, and through a series of events, Zakouma started, the restoration process started. The end result is what it is now, and it is a phenomenal success. So, to cut a long story short, elephant may be keystone to, we all know how valuable they are in an ecological system where, returning proteins or nutrients back into the ground, recycling, opening up water holes, creating microhabitats for other animals, opening up pathways. The list is endless. Everyone understands the ecological value of elephant in nature, but they're keystone to something else. I believe that they are keystone to a greater awareness to this new sacred attitude we should all have towards nature. And if we can't look after elephant, and if we can't pay attention to elephant, how are we going to pay attention to other animals? How are we going to pay attention to the impact of viruses that have the human race, the most advanced, the most sophisticated animal, allegedly, in the history of mankind has been brought to its knees by a virus. And go figure that. There surely can't be anything humbling than that.
Because that's exactly what it boils down to. This thing that's brought us to our knees isn't even technically alive.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is it's a virus. It's a scrap of RNA. It's actually not technically alive. But it certainly has had its way with us, hasn't it? Alan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your words of wisdom. And for those of you that are interested, I'll put a link in below to some of the things that Alan's spoken about, including a link so that if you want to get in touch with him to talk to him about Zakouma, you can do that. Alan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I look forward to maybe doing this properly around a campfire and at the end of some beaten dirt track somewhere at some point soon. So
I think it's probably going to be in Zakouma.
I was born ready to go.
That's what I like to hear. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Russell. Have a good day.